Please state your full legal name for the record.
My name is Dr. Samantha Sleuth.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please describe for the court your educational background.
I am a forensic psychologist. I have received my Bachelor of Arts from Marquette University in Criminology and Law Studies, with a minor in Sociology. I have also received a Master's of Science from Walden University in Forensic Psychology. I then went on to receive my doctorate from Walden University in Forensic Psychology.
How many times have you been an expert witness?
Besides this case, I have been an expert witness for 12 cases.
How much are you getting paid for your testimony today?
I'm getting paid an average of $2.50 an hour.
Did you perform an evaluation on Mr. Bumble?
Yes.
Why were you asked to evaluate Mr. Bumble?
I was requested by the presiding judge, Honorable Billy Bob, to perform a competency evaluation on Mr. Bumble. The purpose of this evaluation was to determine whether the defendant is competent to stand trial.
What legal definition is applicable to the referral question that you addressed when assessing Mr. Bumble?
The definition of competency is coming straight from the U.S. Code, Title 18, Section 4241. A defendant is found incompetent by a judge if the defendant is unable to understand the nature and consequences of the proceedings against him, or is unable to assist properly in his own defense. These have to be a result of a mental disease or a defect. If a defendant has a mental illness and a result of the mental illness cannot understand the legal proceedings or cannot assist in his own defense, the defendant may be found to be incompetent to stand trial by the presiding judge.
What procedures and/or tests did you perform during your evaluation?
There were a number of evaluations that I conducted on Mr. Bumble that ranged from personality inventories, intelligence scale tests, motor and visual maturity assessments. Some of the specific assessments included the psychopathy checklist revised, structured interview of the defendant, Mr. Bumble, Minnesota multiphasic personality test, and the Wechsler adult intelligence test.
What were the results of your evaluation?
Taking into consideration all the assessments and the interview, it is my expert opinion that Mr. Bumble has a diagnosis of schizophrenia paranoid type, which has been present in most of his adult life. Some of the symptoms that are present in Mr. Bumble include paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, and occasional disorganized speech. Mr. Bumble is very hypervigilant and suspicious, which evidences extreme paranoia. He is constantly afraid that people say vulgar and insulting things about him. He believes that he has enemies that are plotting against him and want to harm him. He has also made statements that led me to believe that he might have a slight hint of religious psychosis because he thinks the devil is messing with him and has put demons after Mr. Bumble.
Why do you believe that Mr. Bumble is competent or not competent to stand trial?
After administering the MacArthur Competence Assessment Tool devised for criminal adjudication, I do not believe that Mr. Bumble is competent to stand trial at this time. He has consistently expressed psychotic symptoms that are relevant to psychotic disorders. He has also displayed very subtle hints that led me to believe that Mr. Bumble might also suffer from religious paranoia. He made statements in the interview that incorporated the devil. He believes that the devil is messing with him and has put demons after Mr. Bumble. He is also paranoid about vampires and aliens targeting him, as well as Saddam Hussein. Mr. Bumble's thought process disorder greatly affects his below-average cognitive functioning. As mentioned before, Mr. Bumble is extremely hypervigilant and suspicious of the other people around him. He has been hospitalized on psychiatric problems on 3 separate occasions for brief reactive psychosis, antisocial personality traits, borderline personality disorder, and chronic undifferentiated schizophrenia. Also, when Mr. Bumble was currently housed at the United States Penitentiary, he became agitated towards the examiner because he thought the examiner was going to kill Mr. Bumble. Due to continuous effort on the examiner's part, he was able to relieve Mr. Bumble's suspicion that he was not there to take Mr. Bumble's life.
Did you arrive at a diagnosis for Mr. Bumble?
Yes, I have.
What is your diagnosis?
According to the DSM 4th edition, which is published by the American Psychological Association, my professional opinion is that Mr. Bumble suffers from mental illness known as schizophrenia paranoid type chronic.
Can you describe for the court the reasons for that diagnosis?
Mr. Bumble displayed several symptoms that are correlated with schizophrenia paranoid type, such as suspiciousness, odd or irrational statements, unable to concentrate, and insomnia. As mentioned before, Mr. Bumble feels that people around him are insulting him. He feels that fictional characters such as vampires or aliens are after him. He has also made statements about his defense lawyer being a drug dealer based on the way the lawyer looks. He himself describes his concentration as shaky, is not able to sleep well, and has problems with his appetite, which are all classic symptoms of schizophrenia. Paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, and disorganized speech are all associated with the current diagnosis of schizophrenia paranoid type. Also, Mr. Bumble cannot maintain close relationships with other people.
Is that diagnosis considered to be a mental disease or defect?
Schizophrenia is considered to be a mental disease.
Why?
According to the National Institute of Mental Health, people who are affected by schizophrenia can hear voices that other people can't. Schizophrenics believe that people around them are even fictional characters are reading their minds or even controlling their thoughts. This causes a disruption in the daily lifestyle of schizophrenics.
Do you believe Mr. Bumble understands the proceedings today?
No, I do not believe that Mr. Bumble understands the proceedings as you or I would.
Why not?
Even though he understands what he is being charged with and understands the severity of these consequences, he cannot comprehend in totality what these consequences are at this time.
Do you think Mr. Bumble understands what he is charged with?
Yes, I believe he understands the charges against him.
Why?
Mr. Bumble understands the charges he is facing. However, at this time, it does not appear that he understands the procedures of the court. I do not believe that he understands that he might have to testify under oath.
Do you think Mr. Bumble can work with his attorney to successfully defend himself?
I do not believe that Mr. Bumble can work with his attorney to successfully defend himself.
Why not?
Mr. Bumble has paranoid thoughts and thinks his attorneys want to harm him instead of defending him. He stated in his structured interview that his attorney is a drug dealer and was trying to take his money through a television set. Mr. Bumble cannot form close attachments to people because he has a limited capacity to identify comfortably with other people. Due to his paranoia, it is my expert opinion that Mr. Bumble will most likely believe that his attorneys are conspiring to kill him.
Do you have any other information about Mr. Bumble that you would feel would be helpful to the court?
Not at this time.
Thank you. You may sit down.